In tonight's programme, we're bound for southwest Scotland with an exceptional glimpse of one small town's everyday life. And along with its acclaimed visitors, we'll be taking a remarkable look back to the way we were in Whithorn in the 1950s. Here, a rare glimpse of the man usually behind the camera. Bill Chamberlain recorded some astonishing pictures that captured an era now long since gone.
My father had a great interest in the town, and of course he used to take his camera out and about in what he termed the camera roves round Whithorn. And of course he was interview different people at their doors, walking down the street. You know, if anybody he would meet, he would stop and chat to them, and they would give him some information for his film. You'll see one shot in particular where somebody is leading a horse through the house and coming out onto the main street, and this wasn't uncommon. Lots of houses have a side entrance, and of course they would keep the horse at the back in the garden and then bring it through the side entrance. Well, odd houses of course didn't have a side entrance, so it would have to come out the front door. Most of the people you see in the thing, you know, a camera was a new thing to them, and they were quite delighted to have their picture taken. The town crier in these days was called Wow Black. I don't know what his true name was, but I mean, Wow was always what he was called. He was the town crier of Whithorn for a number of years. I think his father previously was town crier. You'll also see in that the old fire engine coming up the town. That was the Whithorn fire engine in these days. It's it's not very much to look at now in relation to the one we have now, but it was effective in its day. You also see scenes, of course, in there where people are standing outside the shops talking away, and I believe it was a grocer's shop at the top end of Whithorn. And then, of course, further down the street, you'll see Charlie Coyd, who was butchering in Whithorn for a number of years. My father, when he used to go around the town with the camera, he would take people in their natural environment, you know, and doing their everyday chores. Of course, in these days, nearly everybody walked as well. There's not much in the way of transport. Not many cars about the street. My father was the type that he would acknowledge anyone. Didn't matter who they were. And he had such an easygoing way that he could talk to anyone, you know, and they would relate back to him. And this made quite a difference when he was doing filming. He just simply enjoyed doing what he was doing. He'd always had an interest in cinemas, and when the Whithorn cinema came up for sale, he decided to purchase it. And then, of course, when he took some of these events, these local events, from time to time, he would run them in the cinema. And these were generally charity events. You know, the proceeds would go to charity. But the cinema was totally packed. I mean, at one time we could accommodate 400 people in seats. The seats were all filled, and there were still people standing in the aisles. You know, they came in their droves to see these local films. People like to see themselves in these situations, and it was so nice.
The Isle of Whithorn, the port for the small town, has always been a focal point on the Wigtownshire Peninsula, its harbour bursting at the seams on Regatta Day in 1953.
We must remember how important the regatta was in the scheme of things then. There wasn't a lot of entertainment in this part of the world then. And the regatta, which had been going on since the middle of last century, the regatta had just started up again after the war. It was very much a family and a village sports day. You had all sorts of variety in it. You had some of the old vintage boats, ex-fishing boats, still taking part, but you also had the modern sailing dinghies, the modern racing dinghies, starting to be used, and it was this that really G'd up the interest in the sailing in the village. But apart from that, there were all sorts of other events. The most popular of all the events was always the greasy pole, when some poor citizen tried desperately to get out to the end of the greasy pole and collect the money. It was quite a valuable prize. All the prizes were valuable in relation to the time that we're talking about. And they had swimming races for the kids, swimming races for the adults. They had rowing races, the outboard motor races, which consisted mainly of the local little fishing boats with an outboard motor hung on the back and somebody hanging over the bow to keep them running level, because they're quicker when they're running level. And the place was crowded. There were literally hundreds of people attended because it was the main event of the year in the village, and it was a big event in the whole area. After all, this village is connected with the sea and always has been. Its harbour has been an important part of history. Tradition is part of what this village is all about, a seafaring tradition which continued from the days when there were so many people who were directly employed at sea. Primarily, it was a locals' day out. They came from Newton Stewart, they came from Wigton, they came from Port William. Like all semi-social events in that period, it was a great opportunity to meet people that you knew and to talk to relations and friends. It was great fun. As I say, that's why the greasy pole was so popular. And in the rowing races, it was very competitive, and you'd get to one of the turning buoys, and there'd be a water fight going on as the boat behind would splash the boat behind it. You know, it all got quite lively. The spectators were never shortchanged.
And Bill Chamberlain was on hand with his camera when hundreds of people turned out to enjoy a modest day by the sea at Monreath.
In 1952, Mrs. McCracken, who was the local schoolmistress, she decided she would have a sandcastle building competition, which was extremely well attended. Anyone and everyone seemed to be there that day. We didn't see much of the sandcastles in the film, but it was very popular. You'll notice from the dressing these days, you know, that it's not typical of sort of being at a beach. Well, maybe it is in its day. You notice people are all dressed up, you know, they've got their suits on and even their coats on. And I mean, it was a beautiful sunny day. But this was just the dress in these days, you know. People were having their picnics on the beach. Some people had boats there and they were just sort of sailing up and down. And everybody was enjoying themselves. You know, they were doing various things. Obviously, building sandcastles was the main thing. But after that, it turned into a nice social event, and we're sitting chatting. Menreath from Whithorn is typically 8 miles. And I know personally, I mean, we used to cycle there on a Sunday, but there was always a bus. Buses were always running from Whithorn to Menreath, from Port William to Menreath. Everybody congregated at Menreath. As I say, a Sunday was a typical day. Everybody seemed to land at Menreath. It was so well organised that the local ice cream vendors spent the day there, you know, with their vans. It takes me back personally to the days when we used to go there every Sunday.
In Whithorn in the 1950s, one man, Bill Chamberlain, set about recording how life was there long ago. And almost anything made it onto the list of noteworthy events, no matter how small, especially when they turned out to be more memorable than expected.
My boat was called the Sea Gypsy. To begin with, we started building it from scrap wood. We used the floorboards to make the frames and all. We used exterior hardboard because we couldn't really afford plywood at the time. We were hard-up boys. And my pal and Bill Adams was very handy, and the two of us built the boat at the back of the house. The people would hear through hearsay that the boat was being launched. In those days, everybody supported those things more. The day's event started out with the music being played, champagne being broken in the bows. We put up the sails, then we were towed down the harbour. I'm the one who had the longer jacket on, probably tall and thinner than I am now. The hardboard was too heavy actually, and it made the boat heavy. When it took some water into it, it made it quite heavy for sailing. The bother was that neither of us had been used to small boats, sailing in small boats, and we both stood on the one side and it whipped straight over, capsized. He didn't actually see it in the footage that the boat was capsized. He must have missed that, but the boat was capsized. We had to clamber into it and sort of bail it out. My pals lost his gold watch when he was bailing out, so I had to dive down and retrieve the gold watch. I found it lying down the bottom. But that was one of the highlights. It was a big laugh to everybody, big enjoyment day. I mean, if the boat hadn't capsized, it wouldn't have been half a day. So that made the attendances in the cinema were boosted by us going into the water, of course. Retrieved it and pulled it back up the harbour and bailed it out, and the next morning we sailed at 6 o'clock without any interference from anybody. There was nobody in the go, and it did fine.
Whithorn's traditional Gala Queen dance and parade took on special significance the year of Queen Elizabeth's coronation.
In 1953, we had what was called the Coronation dance. The object of it being to choose the Coronation Queen for a gala day. Initially they were chosen from the dancing, and then 10 or 12 participants were then finally chosen on dress and looks and whatever else. They eliminated them down to 3 people eventually, and out of the 3 they chose the Queen, who incidentally was my sister, much to her surprise. But she was chosen as Queen for the following gala day. On the morning of the gala parade, of course, you'll see some of the youngsters preparing for the event. They're all getting their preparations done to join the parade. The gala day would start at the bottom end of Whithorn and would be led by the pipe band. And of course all the floats and everybody in their fancy dress and different outfits. And then of course the youngsters were all dressed up, and some had goats, some had horses, cats, dogs. they would parade them up the street. And of course people were lining the streets at each side to see them, and then the people would follow them to the top of the town, to the top park. And the Queen and her attendants would present all the prizes. But they all thoroughly enjoyed it.
And it was in 1955, 2 years after Queen Elizabeth was crowned, the neighbourhood was captivated as Whithorn prepared to receive the young royal family on the Coronation tour of Britain.
It was like a holiday atmosphere in the town, and my father took all the films, and my sister helped at that time. The town was all decorated. With a special area for senior citizens. You know, they had a vantage point very close to the Queen. And the Queen and the Duke were very relaxed. The whole thing went exceptionally well. All the councillors were out in their best attire. My father was in fact one of the councillors as well, but of course he paraded with the councillors and then he took off to do the filming. They then went to have a look at the dig site, the Whithorn dig site. At that time, it was mainly the crypts, you know, the burial crypts and that. Then they come back down the pen. They came back down there, of course, and met up with all the groups like Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, Boys Brigade. Then the Queen signed the visitors' book. After the event in Whithorn, the Queen actually then moved on to Stranraer. It was the Stranraer cattle show day, and of course the Queen and the Duke were there as patrons, and they were involved in being there at the prize giving and everything. And my father, of course, took the film on the field as well. Well, at the cattle show in Stranraer, my father was more interested, of course, in the, local people. And quite a lot of the farmers, the local farmers, were in the prize list, of course, at Stranraer. And it was showing the various categories of prizes and that sort of thing. And generally the local farmers from this area, more so, than the Stranraer side. After the cattle show at Stranraer, the Queen then joined the Royal Yacht at Stranraer Harbour. On board the yacht was Prince Charles and Princess Anne. They joined up with their children and of course sailed out of Stranraer Harbour. The Royal Yacht took off from Stranraer when it was just about darkness, and it was very nice, a lovely sight to see it leaving Stranraer. The era he did get involved in is now local history.
The regatta was very important to the people of the village and the whole of the surrounding countryside, an important feature of the whole year.
It seems a long time ago, and it is a long time ago, of course.
And of course it's nice to look back on these things. If we had a cinema here today and we advertised to put these on, I can guarantee you the cinema would be full up.